Hi, good morning. An Om wasn't even necessary. That's fantastic. All right. Well, I woke up this morning wondering about love and wisdom, and I decided I couldn't discriminate between them. Of course, the Tibetan was no help at all. He was doing his usual subtle self, and before I knew it, I was in trouble because this whole talk is based on the discrimination between love and wisdom. Anyway, it'll be a shorter talk. Well, actually, I started adding to it, that's the problem. So then everything I couldn't say, I put in green and said, not now. But the day may yet come. Okay. So, contrasting love and wisdom with related points concerning knowledge and understanding, if I get to them. Well, the idea is that if we ponder carefully on the qualities of the soul and the triad, we will understand them more deeply. He says the way to love is to ponder on love, meditate on love, and I assume the way to be wise is to ponder on that and so forth. But, I learned, of course, that the definitions are not cut and dried, and the more we look into these two factors, the more we realize that the Tibetan approaches understanding them with great subtlety. And he frequently merges and blends the two, so I'm reading definitions of love that sound like wisdom and vice versa. So he does always, wait, I'm echoing. Okay. He does always prevent us from over-reliance upon the concrete mind, which likes things in a very orderly and separated condition so that we can be perfectly clear and absolutely secure and don't have to worry about anything for the rest of our lives. But, I was looking for the sequence of these things, and perhaps wisdom precedes love in a way, just the way the Buddha precedes the Christ. I was trying to see if there's a chronology there and a developmental process, and I do think that love somehow comes after wisdom, but I'm not dogmatic about that whatsoever. Wisdom involves the Mercurian mind, It's Mercurian in nature. As I've said before, the Buddha seems to encapsulate mind, wisdom. The Christ seems to encapsulate love, wisdom. But without the open heart, whatever that really means, because there's so many 12s in our system, there's lots of hearts in our system here. But without the open heart, we're not going to be able to achieve the wisdom. So the two go hand in hand, really. As for personal and transpersonal wisdom, they seem to be worked up from below. It's what you do, what you've learned, the quality you've stored in your causal body. It's been alchemized by Venus. It's put in there, and you have it as a result of your work. But the wisdom part, which is transcendental, you might say, not transpersonal, but impersonal and transcendental, seems to be inherent in the planetary logos and solar logos themselves. So they seem... could you press the button so I don't do what I'm planning to do? Yeah. Okay. They seem to be the gift of the monad. They seem to be the gift of what we are from when we... not in the individual state we are now, but when we left the very height of the universe, So the monad has been a lot of places and done a lot of things. And that's quite a contrast to what Blavatsky seems to say, as a passive spirit. I think the monad is very active, and I think DK kind of emphasizes that in distinction to Blavatsky. But then again, one must always be cautious in making such judgments. Here's a useful encapsulation. There's so much material, if we ever really want to absorb this. Anyway, but a few useful things maybe. That love is considered as relationship to divinity, and wisdom as relationship to form, and these two lie behind the soul's intent. So love as relationship to divinity and wisdom as relationship to form lie behind the soul's intent. I try to, we're going to have to think deeply here if we can do that. There's some beautiful definitions, but I want to get to the contrasting of the two if I can possibly do it. Here's a definition of love which almost borders on a definition of wisdom. Love is the right apprehension of the uses and purposes of form. We just said that about wisdom, no? And of the energies involved in form building, the utilization of form, and, this is important, the eventual dissipation of this superseded form. All that is love. It involves a realization of the laws of attraction and repulsion, of the magnetic interplay between all forms, great and small, of group relationships, of the galvanizing power of the unifying life, and the attractive power of one unit upon another, be it an atom, man, or solar system. It involves an understanding of all forms. That sounds like wisdom. It involves an understanding of all forms, form purposes, and form relationships. It concerns the building processes in man himself and in the solar system, and it necessitates the development of those powers, and this is good, within man, which will make him a conscious builder, a solar petri of a coming cycle. Are you ready for that? Then you can have your home within one of those solar logoi, just the way the present solar petries do. So this is about love. Now here, he calls love wisdom. Okay, this is interesting. Maybe it's true love. Okay, true love or wisdom sees with perfect clarity the deficiencies of any form and bends every effort to aid the indwelling life to liberate itself from trammels. It wisely recognizes those that need help and those that need not its attention. It's an important discrimination. It hears with precision and sees the thought of the heart and seeks ever to blend into one whole the workers in the field of the world. This it achieves not by blindness, but by discrimination and wisdom. But he just said love is wisdom. Okay, so here we go. Separating contrary vibrations and placing them in position diverse. Then a little caveat here. Too much emphasis has been laid on that called love, as interpreted by man according to his present place in evolution, and not enough has been placed on wisdom, which is love expressing itself in service. Such a service that recognizes the occult law and significance of time and the point achieved. So I'm beginning to think, that we may feel that we're on the love line or the wisdom line, but both are just so indispensable to each other. And we're going to want to cultivate them in that way so we have the balance which we've been trying to do. By the way, along the line in my, sort of wee hours in the morning researches here, again, it came to my attention DK's insistence that we as satiricists had better discriminate between the words spiritual and divine. So they are not the same, nor do they have the same significance. He says the quality of spirituality is love, and the quality of divinity is will, and there's a definite distinction between the two, and the mediating principle is wisdom. Wisdom mediating, like the Buddha does, between the shambolic will and the love of the hierarchy. So in this case, wisdom is a mediating principle, very much like it's originating, Mercury is so connected with wisdom, and it's the great mediator, and the Buddha is Mercury in a certain planetary sense. Now here comes all my green paragraphs, my not now paragraphs. Okay, now here's another one. So wisdom is the product of the hall of wisdom and way beyond, because obviously all of the great gods have to have increasing wisdom, planetary logoi, solar logoi. They're all just little, our solar logos is like a crystal to what? A galactic logos or something like that. It gets very big and you've got plenty of time. Okay. So wisdom has to do with the development of the life within the form and with the progress of the spirit through those ever-changing vehicles and with the expansions of consciousness that succeed each other from life to life. So it deals with the life side of evolution. Now, I like this one very much, and this is one of those ones you can sort of paste in your whatever it is here, and remember. You know, Master Moria says, press your nose if you want to remember something, you know. So I go further, I repeat it 3 times as I press my nose. Okay. So, wisdom, since it deals with the essence of things and not with things in themselves, it is the intuitive apprehension of truth apart from the reasoning faculty. You know how we try to get there by thinking about it, and then it hits you. You know, there it is. And pure reason strikes you, and that's wisdom, that's Buddhi, that's Mercury. You know, up on the Buddhic plane, there's so many things going on. It's love, wisdom, it's harmony, it's pure reason. You know, a number of factors that relate to different planets are operating there. It's just not all love, it's love and wisdom there. And there's a whole lot of what he calls, what do you call it? Transcendental mind going on the Buddhic level, which is a higher aspect of Mercury. So maybe as we build the Antakarana, we will get there. So anyway, it gives that innate perception that can distinguish between the false and the true, between the real and the unreal. Thus, I thought to myself, we have 5 injunctions where they tell us, you know, go from this to that, go from this to that. And I'm thinking it takes wisdom to do that. Think for a minute. Lead us from darkness to light. Wisdom required. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Wisdom required. From death to immortality, from chaos to beauty, and from the individual to the universal. Wisdom always required. It's the bridging principle in this particular case. Now, I think I love this too, you know. I'm just giving you a collection of little tidbits I love, okay? So that's the essence of this talk here. Wisdom is the science of the spirit, just as knowledge is the science of matter. Knowledge is separative and objective, whilst wisdom is synthetic and subjective. Knowledge divides, wisdom unites. Knowledge differentiates, whilst wisdom blends. What then is meant by the understanding? Tune in for another talk. Okay. But right in the beginning of Glamour, he gives this marvelous stuff about wisdom, love, understanding. You know, in the beginning of the Glamour book, that's where you want to go, because it really is so beautifully clear. All right. Wow. All right, here's the definition of love in a pure form. Love is that inclusive, non-critical, magnetic comprehension and attitude which in group work preserves the group integrity, fosters the group rhythm, and permits no secondary personality happenings or attitudes to mar the group work. I gave that out on the first night. You know, it's really worth considering whether we treat each other in our group work with the factor of love. And then one of my favorites, which is again, I read this before, but you know, it bears another pass. Love was the impelling motive for manifestation, and love it is that keeps all in ordered sequence. That's the pure reason part of love, okay? Love bears all on the path of return to the Father's bosom, and love eventually perfects all that is. It is love that builds the forms that cradle temporarily the inner hidden life, and love is the cause of the disruption of those forms. Isn't that interesting? He keeps on repeating how love destroys when the time is up. See, it's no love to hang on to a form which inhibits the expression of all you are. So love can be very destructive, and as I said before, and we've taken in, love destroys the causal body. Basically, interesting, really. I mean, other things pitch in, but love is a big one, okay? So, love is the cause of the disruption of those forms and their utter shattering. Vulcan, love can, okay, and their utter shattering, so that love may further progress. Life may further progress. Love manifests on each plane as the urge that drives the evolving monad onward to its goal, and love is the key to the Deva kingdom and the reason of the blending of the two kingdoms eventually in the divine hermaphrodite, and that's done on the monadic plane. We blend the Devas and human kingdom on the monadic plane. Well, now I'm going to get into distinctions that cannot be made. But nevertheless, it doesn't hurt to discriminate at first and then see all the reasons why the discrimination is only partially true. So let's think together on this, touching on some thoughts of the contrast between love and wisdom and hoping for a degree of realization. But what is important, of course, is not what I say here, but you arriving at your own conclusions about love and about wisdom. Your own stuff is more important. But, a trigger can occur, and if we get triggered, that's good. So let's think, let's get into a meditative state here about these contrasts, realizing that they are only partially true. As Mercury is to wisdom, so Venus is to love, an analogy. On a higher turn of the spiral, as Uranus is to wisdom, so Neptune is to love. Saturn makes sure we obey. Love and wisdom more closely represent eternity than knowledge does, though only being truly represents eternity. Knowledge simply presents the current instantiation, I love that word, instantiation, the instance of Mahamaya, the possibility of apprehending the nature of all relations within the present universe, which is just a tiny thing. Now let's think about this one because this is really a mind bender. Without universal logoic self-perception, which produces the great emanative variety we call a universe, wisdom is not required, and neither is love. So if we didn't have that self-perception that ends up being a universe, it's the universal logos self-perceiving, we would need neither wisdom nor love. But since we do have it and emanation occurs, we need to adjust all relations in those emanations between themselves, and love and wisdom are necessary. Here's the simplification. Love fuses all into one. Wisdom, using the form as it should be used archetypally, apportions all unique self-perceptions into a reflection of the divine archetype. In other words, each one of us is nothing but a self-perception. And we have an archetype. And all things must find their archetypal relations. And wisdom is what does that. Wisdom makes the archetypes possible. To live as an archetype is to live as a monad and beyond. So wisdom helps us with monadic living on the lower levels. Love just, well, you think about it. You will have a chance in a minute. We have 4 minutes left. Okay. So, and all things are unique self-perceptions. Love transcends the condition of form. All boundaries are dissolved, fusing the many into the one, as the disciple re-becomes the essence, which holds all forms in solution. But wisdom respects boundaries, arising through the development in time and space, so as to provide for the growth of consciousness within the form. If you want to have this and look at it, I'm perfectly happy to share it with you. Real love leads swiftly to identification, which is a great merging with and the object of perception. A merging with and as the object of perception, but wisdom retains a detachment and is able to see what must be done because it can view all things from the perspective of detachment. So together, love and wisdom lead to a state which is of apprehension, which is both attached and detached at the same time. Now, here's a minute, just ponder. Think of merging in essence with someone you love. Now think of a wise approach to that person which will help the individual deal with the problems engendered by the relationship between consciousness and form. That's more the wisdom side. Think For a moment, you love this person, you're merging in essence with them. Now think of the wise approach to this individual. And maybe there is a difference between that merging and the wise approach. Maybe that's a distinction. Love can be, very foolish without wisdom, and wisdom can be entirely too remote, too austere without love. Of course, I'm looking at the extremes, because love is wisdom and wisdom is love, really, but I'm trying to see if there are some polarities here. But in our solar system, of course, they are indispensable to each other. Gosh, I'm not even going to read this next paragraph because I don't understand it. Anyway, love impels towards identification. Wisdom reveals the essential homogenation of the apparently articulated form so that identification can be realized. In other words, everything looks different. Everything seems to be different, but it's not. And wisdom reveals the fact that all these distinctions are not differences. This is interesting. Well, I have to have respect for the time. I'm having a good time here. So, every day, was I wise today? Was I loving today? Was I wisely loving? Was I lovingly wise? Okay, even 5 minutes will reveal our relationship to these very necessary virtues. So try to ask yourself those questions today and see if when you approach each other and whatever, does wisdom prevail? Does love prevail? Does love wisdom prevail? Is it even a factor? Have it in mind. Okay. Thank you.